Welcome in. This is Erik McKinney, joined by Katz, and we are talking USC head coaching stuff today. Wednesday was a big day. It didn't feel like a huge announcement the way USC went about it. Two back-to-back tweets from athletic director Mike Bohn, and he says Clay Helton will continue to be the head coach at USC. It was kind of leaked a little bit the previous evening, and so kind of had a chance to wrap our heads around it and figure that it was coming. But this was not something that either of us, and I think maybe anybody, saw coming when Mike Bohn was initially announced. He's announced coming on the heels of that Oregon game where the Ducks came into LA and just absolutely blew USC away. At the time, it looked like that probably ended USC's chances at a Pac-12 South title. That turns out to be true. USC, they put it together a little bit over the final 3 games of the year, 3 wins at Cal, at Arizona State, and home against UCLA, those 3 wins. But it still felt like a change needed to be made. The athletic director, the president, anybody involved in this decision says no, they're going with Clay Helton. Your just overall take when you first hear that that's the decision, what's going through your head? How do you take that?
Well, I was concerned from the very beginning when I saw the bromance after the UCLA game on the field, this hugging and, Clay Helton's telling, Mike Bohn, you're 3-0 and Coach Bohn. And, I've seen him do this before. He's working the floor with the same game plan, if you will, to try to save his job. And he gives game balls to, Carol Folt, the USC president. And, I don't blame him for doing it. When your job's on the line, you'll do whatever is going to work. But I think it did work. I'm not so sure it worked with Bohn per se, but I definitely think it worked with Folt because I think she was basically recruited. She was recruited to the point where she was not able to connect what's happened here in the last 4 years with what she was seeing face to face with her football coach. There's no question that Clay Helton is a very nice man. He's very respectful of everybody. He's everybody that it's the type of person you say, wow, this guy's really a good guy. It's refreshing to see a guy in, at a USC acting, not aloof or above it. But when it comes down to it, you had to separate Clay Helton, the man, from Clay Helton, the coach. I don't think she did that. I think in the end, as a former coach, there used to be the old joke, does the assistant coach tell the head coach what to do? And I think Bohn probably said, here's the deal, here's what was going on. And she probably said, back of her mind, I really just want Clay Helton. Okay? I want to give this guy a chance. Well, here's the problem. If you're a USC fan, you've seen plenty of chances for Clay Helton. You're already on step 5, and she's just at step 1. So you think you know already what the situation is, and she doesn't. And I've met her. She's a sweet, very engaging personality. But I don't think she quite understands the frustration of the USC fans. Winning cures everything. But when you're going to play in a bowl game, and if you're going to play against a matched opponent, like let's just say Michigan in the Holiday Bowl, and you get spanked by Michigan because they're so physical, and then you go up against Alabama to start the season in 2020, there's not a lot of leeway for the fan base to catch its breath. And I think the biggest takeaway I have, Erik, is, SC fans always from year to year have hope that they're going to challenge for a national championship. That was reinforced a decade ago with Pete Carroll. Okay. I think it's a reasonable thing. SC has won national championships almost, it seems like every decade. And if not one decade, they might skip a decade and a half, but then they're back at it. And I think what they did, I should say Carol Folt did. I'm really not placing that much. Mike Bohn was the point man, okay? And I looked at his Twitter site, and it is absolutely on fire, okay? but he was the guy who was the more visible, you know. And but the fact of the matter is, he didn't make a decision the next day after the UCLA game. There's a timeline there that, you know, as they say, like in a court of law, look at the timeline. Obviously, if that's what he wanted to do, hire him back, he would have. Okay, so he maybe did what he was supposed to do, but in the end, it was her call. It was her call, and she stands in the background of it all, and he takes the arrows. But what happened was, in my opinion, they took away the hope that next year could be a national championship team. And people have already seen Clay Helton. They know what he does. They know his good points. They know his weak points. And we haven't even started spring practice yet. We haven't even signed the early letter of intent yet. And it seems like to me that all the hope is like the air let out of the balloon, and apathy is the only alternative in the future. And I don't think I'm being negative. I think I'm being realistic.
Yeah, there were a couple things for me in you mentioned the timeline, and it really that gap between the end of the UCLA game and the announcement on Wednesday afternoon. There's so much time in between there. And I understand even the idea of, well, we're going to wait and we're going to see, you know, what happens with Utah, Colorado. That it turns out now that clearly didn't matter. If you're bringing him back after you didn't go to the Pac-12 championship game, the result of that game, which is kind of what I felt from the beginning, if Colorado beats Utah, that doesn't change anything that USC did on the field. If Utah beats Colorado, same thing. USC still was what they were this year. I don't know if you let that game play at all in this decision-making process, but boy, that feels like a long time to then basically say we never pursued anybody else. Clay Helton was always the guy. There were so many things that we heard today that kind of ring hollow. You know, when Mike Bohn says recruiting is going better than anybody will admit to. I don't have the exact quote, but when he basically says recruiting is going better than anybody is saying, it's like nobody ever really has had to hold their tongue to praise USC recruiting before. That's something where it was always, you know, hey, they've lost a few games, but recruiting's going well and it always will go well. When people are saying it's not going well, it's not like, oh, they don't want to give USC the benefit of the doubt. The reason they're talking about it is because it's such an aberration. This does not happen, and it sticks out in a big way. So to have so many comments today about, you know, we're gonna finish up this phenomenal recruiting, outstanding recruiting class, and recruiting's going better. Again, I don't think you hire a coach just because he can get you a recruiting class, but it was just kind of a small example today of hearing a lot of stuff. And again, it's a decision, and it didn't really even need a statement. His contract was not up. It's not as if you were filling an open spot. This is something where you kind of easily could just say he's the coach and move on. It felt like they used a lot of words to kind of try to justify it to a USC fan base, like you mentioned, that is just, they're just not buying it. They're not buying it. And the amount of kind of pent up anger that was released today was maybe surprising for Mike Bohn and for Carol Folt that existed at that level out there. Again, I think trying to find a way to direct it for USC fans is challenging because all they know is kind of what they see and what they're being told. And like you said, the fact that it feels like they've seen this before, that they know what they're getting behind this door, again, just a lot of frustration. And then again, a lot in the explanation of, you know, he deserves this chance and you know, that kind of stuff. It's sort of how, you know, where's that coming from? So there's a little bit of a disconnect there, but I am curious to go in a little bit with you, trying to spin forward a little bit. This is done, and obviously we could kind of go back and forth about this for however much time we needed to fill. But now this decision seems to bring up so many more questions. When you can sort of wipe the slate clean, bring in a new coach, you know, all right, he's probably bringing in an entirely new staff. He's probably going to restructure how the program goes, but you know you're kind of settling in for a long haul, not necessarily rebuild, but a long haul change. He's going to get a few years, and we'll see what direction he takes this in. Now there's so many questions because what do you do at coordinators? Now they're, reportedly Graham Harrell, the offensive coordinator, has interviewed for the head coaching job at UNLV, has interviewed for the offensive coordinator job at Texas. You're talking about now maybe forcing his hand to get a new defensive coordinator, a new special teams coordinator. That is a lot of changes. Where do you see how is USC able to maybe find some momentum or maybe some positivity in this? Again, like you mentioned, people aren't really even trying to look for positivity. It feels like right now.
Well, first of all, the Clay Helton situation has been a major distraction to focusing in. The interesting thing is nobody talks about the team. Nobody talks about the team going to a bowl game. Everyone is so fixated on Clay Helton that he's taking away, it's not his fault, but the situation of him. So what are we really left with? Okay, Keaton Slovis is going to return, okay? We don't know what's going to happen with Graham Harrell, but I will tell you this. If somebody is interviewing other jobs, that doesn't give you the sense that they're looking to stay. And I don't think he'll stay if he gets a chance to go. So that leads to the question from a football standpoint, who does he hire that knows how to run this offense? Who? Is he going to make himself offensive coordinator because he goes, nobody else knows it by me? Is he going to go with Mike Jenks, who ran this when he was at Bowling Green, I guess, at some level, and he came from originally from a air raid offense. Okay, but the changes in the staff could be massive. I mean, people talk about last year. Well, they didn't do enough. They just did offense. I think on both sides of the ball, I think the one I'm really looking at is special teams, because there is a personal relationship between Clay Helton and John Baxter. I think Baxter was either at his wedding or in his wedding, one or the other. That's what I think I was told. If that's accurate, you're talking about having to get rid of somebody who you have had a security blanket with. Same thing with Clancy. Now, I like Clancy Pendergast on a personal level. He's very professional. He's always a nice guy. But so is Clay Helton. And the big complaint about Clay Helton is, people aren't really enthused by what he does. I think people are not enthused by what Clancy does. I think he does what he does. And there's a lot of questions there. So let's face it. They could lose the outside linebacker coach, the defensive coordinator. They could lose any number of people, maybe a surprise or two. You could be looking at 4 or 5 guys coming in. And how does that affect the team? We always just to look at how many offensive line coaches SC had in a 5-year period. That every year, it seems like they were getting a new offensive line coach. And what did that do to the offensive linemen? They didn't know what techniques to practice, for 2 or 3 years and get it down right. So from that standpoint, I think it really bears watching. I think Bone is really going to push Helton. You need to get rid of this guy. You need to get rid of this guy. You need to change this guy. And I don't think Helton is in any position to say, but I want to keep him. Okay. There's being on borrowed time. Clay Helton's on Clay Helton time. We've gone beyond borrowed time. Okay. The team itself should be pretty good. I don't care what offense they run. Slovis is going to be really good. But then we have this interesting fact. JT Daniels has said he's going to be there next year. Okay. We know that a lot of people have the sense that JT Daniels was really Clay Helton's guy. Okay. How is Clay Helton going to deal with that one? Okay. How is JT Daniels going to handle that one? How is anybody going to handle the transfer portal? We don't know how the team, we were told in the release today, the kids love him. I don't know if that's necessarily true. I think they like him, but liking him and liking him as a football mind and a coach might be a little different. Okay. So there's a lot of team psychology there. Their problem is still one thing that Bone did say, we need to get more physical on the lines. Well, you, me, and the guy that sits in tunnel 19, 23rd row has been saying it for years and years. And Helton first promised us, we're going to be physical. We're going to have a balanced attack. That was, his first year. Well, we know that's not true. He didn't recruit to that. And now we're left with offensive line that's really, maybe they were as good as they could be. Give them credit. They worked hard. Drevno worked hard with them, but they were not elite. They're not elite. But here's the problem. Beating teams 5 out of 6 games at the end may have impressed Carol Folt. Like, oh, look, we're beating all these teams. But you, me, and the guy that sits in tunnel 19, row 23 goes, yeah, but their combined record of the 5 teams they beat was like almost 500 or less. So it comes to the point where you just go, look, we know what the weaknesses are. How do you get stronger on both sides of the line? We don't know. Jay Trapelli might sit there and go to the NFL. That's a possibility. Who do you replace him with? So from a personnel standpoint, getting away from the Helton, he's back, scenario, and looking forward, spring ball will be interesting if they have a bunch of new coaches, and it'll be incredibly interesting if they have to replace not only an offensive coordinator, but a quarterback coach too. How does that affect Slovis? Because he's going to get somebody else who has a new philosophy and says, I want you to do it this way.
I think those are all really interesting points. And I agree with all of them. Clay Helton at this point, it feels like he's going to have to go through another rebuilding process and do it really quickly. And maybe you don't, you certainly right out of the gate next year, you don't have Fresno State lined up for you, a nice kind of home opener out of the gate. You're at a neutral site against Alabama. And I know that's way down the line, but one of the things, again, we need to get more physical on the line. Chalk that up with a number of things that we have heard. We need to do this. We need to do this. We need to do this. This last spring, we need to get better at turnover margin. We need to get better at penalties. They're still down in the hundreds, in the low hundreds, when it comes to those things. So it's clear that you can say, hey, we just have to do these couple things, and it's like those are massive kind of culture things. Getting tougher on the lines of scrimmage. That's not just the kids are doing, the players are doing what they can do along those lines. The players don't go out there and they go, hey guys, take it easy. We're going soft today. They're going hard, developing that, building that culture, not recruiting 4 total, 5 with the graduate transfer, 5 total offensive linemen in the last 2 recruiting classes. It just feels like you kind of show year over year that you're not dedicated to those things. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh, hey, we need to get better at this. Do you have sort of a foundation built to do those things? And I think that's kind of where the biggest issue comes in with keeping him is have you seen enough of those? And again, you mentioned these are 2 new people ultimately responsible for this decision. And Carol Full has said today that she let Mike Bone make that decision and she stands behind his decision 100%. So these are 2 people that have not been around USC for a long time, that did not see kind of what even was happening in those 2016, 2017 seasons, what led to that 2018 collapse. And then again, this schedule this year actually maybe saves Clay Helton. If it's flipped and you get those first 6 games at the beginning and you're 5-1, and then you go 3-3 over the last 6 games, maybe we're not talking about this kind of same momentum building and all of that. So I think there's a lot of stuff that went into this. And again, just the idea of, oh, we just need to get better at these couple of things. There is so much kind of prove it out there, because again, it was, we spent all year, they're going to get better at penalties. They're going to get better at turnovers. There's going to be more competition. And does he know how to really install those things? Those are still some massive questions. And now if you're trying to do that, again, if he's forced to make big changes with his assistant coaches, if he doesn't have that kind of reliable guy there in John Baxter and in Clancy Pendergast. They have those relationships where he can kind of just lean on those guys a little bit at those situations. If you have to bring in somebody, and let's not forget to mention anybody that you go out right now. I mean, I'm interested in your take on this. Anybody you try to go out and bring in, this is hanging over them. The idea that maybe this is not kind of a long-term thing. Now, if Graham Harrell does go, say he gets the Texas offensive coordinator job or even the UNLV head coaching job, I think maybe you can use that. Look, if you come to USC, you're in a spotlight. If you do well and something goes, something happens, you can land somewhere. But that it's a tough sales pitch. I mean, what's your kind of take on maybe the kind of guy you can go get, or how difficult that's going to be if, again, they have to make kind of significant coaching changes? How do you expect the staff, maybe not who do you expect to be here, but what kind of coach can you go get? How will that process shake out?
Well, I think you have to have a coach that's young, because an older coach is going to be established. Older coach is probably going to have a family. Why would you move your family from the East Coast or the Midwest for a coach, and you might only be there 1 year? And now you have to take your kids out of school. You have to relocate again. You have, who knows, you're going to be a vagabond with your family. You don't want that. Most of the successful coaches that have good staffs, those staffs stay around for a long time, because it's not just the coaching end of it, it's your family. So first of all, it would have to be somebody, like you said, that wants to say, I coached at USC. Okay. I would be shocked if they get somebody that you and I have heard of, that's very familiar, that has coming from a big time program. Let's face it. It's like rearranging the decks on the chairs on the Titanic is what it amounts to right now. And the people that are going to sit in those chairs are going to have to be people that are willing to go and take a chance with very little to lose and everything to gain. And to me, if Erik McKinney was an assistant coach in the Midwest with his 3 children and his wife, would he be willing to move to Los Angeles for 1 year at USC, or live on the edge going, is he going to get fired? What happens if he got fired in the 8th game of next year? All of a sudden you're going, honey, I don't know what we're going to do. I don't know who the new guy is going to be. I got to put food on the table. It's a complex situation. So I don't think he's going to get the cream of the crop. He might luck into getting somebody who's really good and no one's ever heard of, and he comes from Cal Lutheran or something like that. Or, I don't know if he's that dynamic in his Rolodex of names, because he sticks with the same people that he feels comfortable with. Neil Callaway, we know how that turned out. Okay. Clancy Pendergast, chances are he's not going to be the defensive coordinator next year. I'm not wishing it on him, but that would be a change. So it's not going to be easy to fill these positions with assistant coaches that, are they going to get Dave Aranda from LSU? No. Are they going to get Alex Grinch from Ohio State? No. These were young guys that have moved up. SC's going to have to get a young guy that he thinks can do the job, because the last thing they need on any of these assistant coaches jobs are assistants who are in training. You go in training when you're in the Mountain West Conference. You shouldn't be in training when you come to the Pac-12. And that's kind of my trepidation about it.
Yeah. And I, it is one of those things where you look at this roster for next year, and you mentioned Keaton Slovis coming back. That quarterback competition is going to be so fascinating. I mean, JT Daniels, the fact that he has said he's staying, he has to feel like he has a shot to come back. Again, the idea that you don't lose your job to injury, he's got to feel like he has a shot. Keaton Slovis, I don't know what else he could have done this year to make a statement that says there is no quarterback competition and that this is his team. But you've got some talent there. The running backs are phenomenal. I mean, the team you have coming back next year could sort of slow motion their way to 8 wins, I think. I mean, it's a tough schedule, but there's a lot of talent there. So I do think it's one of those things where there's a lot of frustration today, but like you mentioned, USC, I mean, winning kind of cures all. That's kind of something we've always talked about. The recruiting thing is interesting because this last class, I think, was fine. There's some really high-end, high-impact guys in it. We've seen Drake Jackson. We've seen Drake London, Keenan Kristen, Keaton Slovis. We've seen a lot of the skill from the top guys. Chris Steele is in that class. Flashes from some other
But
guys.
what we haven't seen are linemen.
Linemen, yes.
And I will tell you this. They'll be good up to a point.
Mm-hmm.
They'll beat their Arizonas. They'll beat maybe Arizona State here. They'll beat those type of teams. But the goal isn't to beat those type of teams. The goal is to win the championship. And the championship's going to go through Autzen Stadium. I believe SC will be picked to win the championship. But will they have the horses on the offensive line? If Austin Jackson, for example, decides to go to the NFL, who do you got to replace him at left tackle? I mean, that's important for a guy like Slovis.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a question mark there in terms of, they'll probably win 8 games. I think both of you and I agree, they could admit the worst. That should be no worse than 8-4. But you start off with Alabama, and then you're going to end up with Notre Dame. Okay. And in between, you got those road games at Utah. You got a road game at Autzen Stadium. And, who knows? What about Stanford? They're going to be up at Stanford. Stanford's got to be better than what they were this year. Okay. I mean, they were a train wreck at times. So, a lot of stuff that could happen, a lot of stuff that has to happen. And if they don't have the linemen inside, they'll be a good team. They'll be a Holiday Bowl team. But I don't think that's what anybody wants. And here's the thing. The worst thing that can happen is next year is people going, I told you this was going to happen. We're not shocked. What did you expect? And that's the worst thing that's going to happen, because that's when we start this ridiculous cycle all over again. It's like Groundhog Day.
Mm-hmm. And I think the players are going to be, they're going to be fired up. They're going to go. But that was exactly my point, is you've got all this skill, but are you building, again, I kind of mentioned it a lot, building a foundation, building a program, that starts with the line. And I was actually really glad to hear Mike Bone talk about that, talk specifically about the line, because I mentioned you bring in 5 guys, and now Drew Richmond, the grad transfer you brought in, he's not there anymore. So from the last 2 classes, you have 4 offensive linemen in this program. They have loaded up with offensive linemen in this class. So certainly a good thing to see there. But we mentioned that kind of top end talent that they're going to have for this class. Those offensive linemen after that year, if you don't have them anymore, where is that coming from? Are you building for the long haul at this point, or are you set up to maybe get a flash next year and then things kind of fall back to earth? That's kind of the question, I think, that faces Clay Helton, because that's the question that we ask almost every week. What team is coming out of that tunnel? Who are we going to see this week? Is this going to be, the team that lights things up in the first quarter and then falls apart? Is this going to be, the Colorado team that comes back from a double-digit fourth quarter deficit? Is this going to be a team that just kind of comes out flat the whole game? I mean, you just don't know. And I think that, for me, is still the biggest question. Years into Clay Helton's tenure, the biggest question. Who is Clay Helton as a coach? What does he want to emphasize? Where is he building his program? And what can you count on with this team, with this program moving forward? I'm interested to see. I don't necessarily see him being kept. I see him being kept as the wrong answer of the question of where you should go. But I don't see this as necessarily being, we're never going to see the USC program do anything significant ever again under him. I think there is stuff there that he could build. We've seen with some of his assistant coach hires this last offseason that he can get some of those right. I think you can question, did he do enough last offseason? And again, those are some of the tons of questions that you're still asking. But that's kind of what I want to see. I want to see him be able to build something ground up where you know what you're getting from this USC team, outside of just they didn't quit. They played hard. That's important, yes, but that's got to just be one piece of a much bigger puzzle. So for me, that's kind of, those are the questions that still exist because you've kind of hitched yourself to Clay Helton, at least for the foreseeable future. So those are the biggest things left for me outside of this announcement today.
Well, we're going to see. It's all going to really start with this bowl game. Okay, this quote, great bowl game we're going to play in. I don't know if I would call the Alamo Bowl or Holiday Bowl a great bowl game. I think they're good bowl games. But if you ask the Trojan fans, would you rather go to the Rose Bowl or the Holiday Bowl? Would you rather go to the Sugar Bowl or the Alamo Bowl? You know, when I say we, as someone who's been following the program for a long, long time, we're conditioned to being an elite powerhouse. I think what's going to have to happen is that Folk especially is going to have to understand the culture at SC, that it's different than where she came from. North Carolina is not a traditional national power. They have some good teams, some good players go to the NFL, but they're not USC. They're not Notre Dame. They're not Oklahoma. And she's going to have to up her game so that when we go through this again, either next year or whenever, that she has a full understanding of the expectations, and that having someone who's a nice guy that she feels comfortable around. You know, I used to have a friend of mine who was older than me, and he said to me, "You don't have to be my drinking buddy. You just have to produce. Because we'll get along just fine." Okay? And I think that's what she's going to have to realize, that this isn't, let's be friends, so to speak. I mean, that is nice if it happens. But look, you're running a business. USC football is a business. It's a sports business. It's a minor NFL, whatever you want to call it, franchise. And if you don't run it that way, you're no different than Washington State on a bad season. And there's no way Utah should win the Pac-12 South 2 years in a row, because if you've ever been to Salt Lake City, you know there's not enough population to sustain it. So how are they doing it? What are they doing? Is Oregon doing? And we're in the middle of the biggest recruiting fertile ground there is in the country. You know, it can only be self-inflicted wounds. And they're going to have to ask, who is inflicting the wounds on ourselves? Why are we playing defense on ourselves? So, it's so complex, but it really isn't, because we already know what the problems are. It's whether you want to fix them by fixing them, or you want to try to fix them by talking yourself, okay, we're going to fix them, and you don't do it. Talking is cheap.
Yeah, and that's what we're going to see. Again, you asked the question about Utah, about Oregon. Utah, the official Pac-12 team's not out yet, but PFF goes through and Pro Football Focus, they take a look at every conference. They put out their all-conference teams. 7 Utah players on the starting 11 defense for that team. And then you look at Oregon's roster and just chock full of Southern California in general, but Southern California standouts that they have come in and recruited away from USC. Those are 2 numbers that are really hard, I think, for USC fans to look at right now, because that's what you're used to from the Trojans. That, you look at that all Pac-12 team, Elijah Vera-Tucker at guard, who was phenomenal this year. Michael Pittman at wide receiver, again, phenomenal this year. Nobody on the defensive side. That's something that's got to change. And then recruiting this 2020 class, I get it. You want to load up with offensive linemen, and it's not a great offensive line year in California, but there are some elite, maybe generational talents in Southern California that USC is not really in the picture for right now. So they're going to have to turn things up in a big way if you want to kind of put any stock in, well, we're going to be able to fix recruiting and we're going to get that going in the right way. But for right now, that's our look at USC retaining Clay Helton, complete with all the questions that it brings up for this USC program going forward. So for Greg Katz, this is Erik McKinney. Thanks for watching WeAreSC.